JFK International Airport, New York, May 18, 1972, 6:30 p.m. Air France Flight 009 from Paris, landing at Terminal 4. On board, Frank Matthews, 28 years old, returning from 10-day business trip. On the ground, 12 DEA agents positioned throughout the terminal. Customs checkpoints, baggage claim, exit doors, parking lot, all covered. They received a tip. Matthews was on this flight. Warrants are ready. Arrest planned. This is it. The DEA's best chance to catch Frank Matthews in 2 years. The plane lands. Passengers begin exiting. DEA agents tense up, hands near weapons, ready to move. Matthews walks off the plane carrying a leather briefcase and one small suitcase. He sees the agents immediately. They're not hiding. They want him to see them. Matthews keeps walking, calm, unhurried, heading straight toward them. The lead agent steps forward. "Mr. Matthews, we need you to come with..." Matthews reaches into his jacket. Every agent's hand moves to their weapon. But Matthews doesn't pull a gun. He pulls out a folded piece of paper, hands it to the lead agent. The agent reads it. His face goes pale. He calls his supervisor over. Whispered, urgent conversation. Matthews stands there, waiting, completely calm. The supervisor reads the paper, looks at Matthews, looks at his agents, makes a decision that will haunt the DEA for years. Matthews walks past all 12 agents, through customs, out of the airport, into a waiting car. Gone. What was on that paper? And how did it make arresting Frank Matthews, wanted fugitive with active warrants, legally impossible? To understand what happened at JFK that evening, you need to know what Matthews had been doing in Paris. He'd spent 10 days meeting with French suppliers, negotiating new distribution agreements, setting up offshore banking arrangements, completely legal business activities, if you ignored what the product actually was. Matthews traveled internationally regularly. London, Amsterdam, Marseille, Paris, always first class, always proper documentation, always clean. The DEA knew about these trips. They'd tried to catch Matthews before. Airport stops, customs searches, surveillance, never found anything. Matthews was too careful. But this time was different. The DEA had received intelligence that Matthews was carrying something on this Paris flight. Not drugs. Matthews would never personally transport product. But documents, financial records, supplier contacts, evidence that could connect Matthews to international trafficking networks. The tip came from a confidential informant who claimed Matthews was bringing back paperwork that would destroy him if seized. So the DEA mobilized 12 agents, full surveillance, legal warrants. This time, they had him. Agent Michael Torres led the operation. 15-year DEA veteran, sharp, experienced, patient. Torres had been investigating Matthews for 18 months. He knew Matthews was smart, knew he was careful, knew he'd never make an obvious mistake. But everyone slips eventually. And Torres believed this Paris trip was that slip. Torres positioned his team strategically. 4 agents at customs. Matthews had to pass through. 3 at baggage claim, in case Matthews tried to bypass customs somehow. 2 at each exit, north and south terminals. 1 in the parking lot, watching Matthews' known vehicles. Complete coverage. No escape routes. But here's where it gets truly shocking. When Flight 009 landed and passengers began deplaning, Torres received confirmation from French authorities. Matthews had boarded in Paris, passport verified, seat 4A, first class, carrying 1 briefcase, 1 suitcase, both inspected at Paris security. Nothing illegal found, but Matthews hadn't allowed deep search, citing diplomatic courtesy. Diplomatic courtesy? That detail bothered Torres. Matthews wasn't a diplomat. He was a drug dealer. Why would French security mention diplomatic courtesy? Matthews walked off the plane at 6:43 p.m. Torres watched through security cameras. Matthews looked exactly like his photos. Well-dressed, expensive suit, confident walk, completely calm. No signs of nervousness, no looking around for cops, just walking like any other business traveler. That confidence bothered Torres too. Matthews knew the DEA was hunting him, knew airports were vulnerable points. Why was he so calm? Matthews cleared the jetway and entered the terminal. Torres gave the signal. Agents moved into position. The plan was simple: intercept Matthews before customs, execute the warrant, search his briefcase and luggage, seize any evidence, make the arrest. Clean, professional, legal. Torres stepped forward, badge visible. Mr. Matthews, I'm Agent Torres, DEA. We need you to come with us. We have a warrant to search. Matthews interrupted. Polite, not aggressive. Agent Torres, before you continue, I need you to read something. He reached into his jacket. Wait, don't miss this detail. Because that moment, Matthews reaching into his jacket in front of 12 armed federal agents required absolute confidence. One nervous agent, one misread movement, and Matthews could have been shot. But Matthews moved slowly, deliberately, pulled out a folded document, handed it to Torres. Torres took it cautiously, unfolded it, started reading. His expression changed immediately: confusion, then shock, then something that looked like anger mixed with disbelief. The document was a letter, on official letterhead. French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, dated May 17, 1972, yesterday. Addressed to United States Drug Enforcement Administration. The letter stated that Frank Matthews was currently engaged in consultations with French law enforcement regarding international drug trafficking networks. That Matthews had provided valuable intelligence to French authorities. That Matthews was traveling under French governmental consultation status, and that any interference with Matthews's travel by U.S. authorities would be considered interference with an ongoing French law enforcement operation, and would require immediate diplomatic coordination between Washington and Paris. Torres read it twice. Couldn't believe what he was seeing. You're telling me you're working with French police? Matthews's expression didn't change. I'm telling you what that letter says, Agent Torres. Whether you believe it or not, that's an official French government document. You're welcome to verify it through diplomatic channels. But right now, I'm telling you that detaining me without French approval would create an international incident your supervisors probably don't want to deal with. Torres called his supervisor. Special Agent in charge, Robert Hammond, explained the situation. Hammond couldn't make this decision alone. He called DEA headquarters in Washington. Reached the deputy administrator, explained, "We have Frank Matthews at JFK. We have warrants, but he's presenting French diplomatic documentation claiming he's working with their government on intelligence sharing. What do we do?" The Washington response took 14 minutes. Longest 14 minutes of Torres's life. Matthews stood there the entire time, calm, patient, briefcase in hand, surrounded by 12 federal agents who couldn't touch him. Airport travelers walking past, noticing the obvious law enforcement presence, wondering what was happening. Finally, Torres's phone rang. Hammond's voice. "Stand down. Let him go. Washington's calling the French embassy to verify. Until we get confirmation, we can't touch him without creating a diplomatic mess." Torres looked at Matthews. "You're free to go, for now." Matthews nodded. "Thank you, Agent Torres. Have a good evening." And then Frank Matthews walked. Past Torres. Past the other 11 agents. Through customs. The agents there had been notified, let him pass without inspection. Through baggage claim. Out the exit. Into a black Lincoln Continental waiting at the curb. Gone. The entire DEA operation, weeks of planning, 12 agents, perfect setup, defeated by one piece of paper. But here's what made this truly devastating for the DEA. After Matthews left, Hammond and Torres spent the next 3 hours trying to verify that French letter. Called the French embassy in Washington. Embassy said they'd need to check with Paris. Called the French ministry directly. Got transferred 5 times. finally told that information about ongoing investigations couldn't be confirmed or denied over the phone. Called Interpol. They'd heard nothing about Matthews cooperating with French authorities. By midnight, the DEA still couldn't verify whether the letter was real or fake. And here's the critical detail: it didn't matter. Real or fake, the letter had worked. Matthews understood something fundamental about law enforcement. They're bound by rules, procedures, international protocols. You can't arrest someone claiming diplomatic protection without verification. You can't create international incidents without authorization from Washington. And by the time you get that authorization, verify the documents, cut through the red tape, the target is long gone. 3 days later, the DEA finally got official response from French authorities. The letter was real, sort of. Frank Matthews had met with French police in Paris. He had provided information about drug trafficking routes, but it wasn't official cooperation. It was informal conversation. The French hadn't given Matthews any protected status. The letter was technically accurate, but practically misleading. It said Matthews was engaged in consultations. True, he'd talked to French cops. It said he'd provided intelligence. True, he'd mentioned some names and routes, but it implied official cooperation and protection that never actually existed. The French were furious, called it a misunderstanding, said the ministry letter was issued in error by a junior official who'd been told Matthews was helping with an investigation, and wrote the letter without proper authorization. The official was reprimanded. The French apologized to the DEA, but the damage was done. Matthews had escaped, and worse, the DEA looked incompetent. 12 agents, perfect setup, and one smooth-talking criminal with a quasi-legitimate letter had walked right through them. But wait, don't miss this detail. Because the really shocking part wasn't that Matthews escaped. It was how he got that letter in the first place. DEA investigators later discovered Matthews had spent significant money in Paris. Not on drugs, not on supplies, on lawyers and consultants. He'd hired a French law firm specializing in international law, paid them $50,000 to arrange meetings with French police. During those meetings, Matthews had indeed shared information. Useless information, stuff the French already knew or couldn't use, but technically accurate intelligence. Then Matthews' lawyers had approached the foreign ministry, explained their client had cooperated with police, was traveling to America, and could the ministry provide documentation of this cooperation for potential use in U.S. legal proceedings. The ministry official, not understanding the full context, thinking this was routine international law enforcement coordination, issued the letter. Probably spent 5 minutes on it. Never imagined it would be used to escape DEA arrest at an airport. Matthews had engineered the entire thing. Spent $50,000 and 10 days in Paris to create one piece of paper that would get him past 12 federal agents at JFK. The return on that investment? Priceless. Agent Torres never caught Frank Matthews. He retired from the DEA in 1985, still bothered by that JFK incident. In a 1990 interview with a true crime researcher, Torres said something revealing. Frank Matthews was the smartest criminal I ever investigated. Most guys, when they're cornered, they run or fight. Matthews did neither. He understood the system better than we did. He knew our rules, our procedures, our limitations, and he used them against us. That airport play, spending 50 grand to create a diplomatic headache that bought him 90 seconds to walk past us, that was brilliant. I respected him, even as I hated letting him go. The JFK incident became a teaching case at DEA training. Instructors use it to teach new agents about legal limitations, diplomatic complications, and criminal sophistication. The lesson: never assume your target is just a street criminal. Some of them are strategists who think 5 moves ahead. Frank Matthews proved that the most effective weapon isn't a gun. It's understanding the law better than law enforcement does. Matthews continued operating for another 14 months after JFK, made millions, expanded territories, outsmarted DEA, FBI, NYPD, until July 1973, when he vanished with $20 million. The DEA investigated his disappearance intensely. One theory they explored: did Matthews use that same French connection to disappear? Did he have diplomatic help escaping the country? They never found proof, but the JFK incident proved Matthews had international connections and knew how to leverage them. So remember this: May 18, 1972, 6:30 p.m., JFK Airport. 12 DEA agents surrounded Frank Matthews. They had warrants, weapons, authority, and the law on their side. Matthews had one briefcase and one piece of paper. He walked past all of them without being touched. Because Matthews understood something those agents didn't. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't force. It's knowing exactly which piece of paper will make force impossible to use. That's who Frank Matthews was. That's why 50 years later, we're still telling his story.